Hello, my name is Seth Getz. I'm with Nuvescor, and we handle a lot of mergers and acquisitions for businesses, particularly in the manufacturing field. And we like to get together with different people who work in the same space that we do in complementary areas and talk to them about what owners should be aware of, what they should think through, what topics they should be bringing up during this time. And so today we have with us Tom Braun of Streamsong Advisors. And Streamsong Advisors is a financial advising company. They've been in business for quite a few years in Grand Rapids. And Tom is one of the founders of that organization. And it's interesting because when you talk to Tom, he does all of the usual financial advising stuff that you expect every financial advisor to do. But there's something different in that he specializes and works quite extensively with business owners, which is really kind of, in some ways, it's almost asking for trouble just because of just how complex the financial picture, the stakeholder picture is for small business owners because of all the businesses that they own. Usually it's not just one business, it's multiple businesses. It's multiple real estate holdings. It is multiple various accounts in various places, and it is the interest in other businesses, both public and private. It can get very complex to know the entire picture. And it's not only the business owner themselves and their family, but you've got to take into account all the other stakeholders of shareholders, employees. So it's a very complex web that you have to navigate. And yet you talk to Tom, and it's something that he absolutely loves to do and to work with them and have these extremely hard conversations. And so I want to bring him on just to talk some of this stuff through. So thank you, Tom, very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So, Tom, as business owners are going through some of these periods, they find themselves facing significant transitions as they start thinking kind of about the future of their business, both with and without them, and whether it's considering a mergers and acquisitions or kind of an exit planning for the business. These transitions come with an amazing amount of, as I said, financial complexities, and not only financial complexities, but emotional challenges. So based on your experience of working with businesses through many of these transitions, what are some of the biggest both financial and emotional and conversational challenges that they face when navigating these things?
Yes, it's every situation is obviously different with our clients and prospects, and then just our network. But there's lots of complexities from the business owner's perspective. I think preparing for an M&A transaction creates a lot of stress and anxiety for a business owner, and some of it's around lack of control. And so when they think about valuation of their business, it's kind of like the valuation of your home. You think it's worth a lot more than it is a lot of times. And so we have to be kind of the voice of reason. And I would say that it really starts with having a relationship and building a relationship with that owner. A lot of times we're managing all of their wealth, all of their extended wealth. And so that doesn't happen overnight. So when we talk about their baby, which is their business, they get stressed right out of the gate. And then they're saying, and I kind of ask the question of, like, what are you trying to do with the business? Are you trying to pass it along? Are you trying to maximize profits now? What's the end goal? And a lot of times I get this deer in the headlight kind of look, like, and so I have to kind of work through, and our team works through with the business owner of setting goals and trying to understand what they're trying to accomplish ultimately. I think our team has a unique position in that I was a business owner. I had a manufacturing company. So this is a second career for me, so I can talk the language. It's much easier. And I think that's why business owners have gravitated towards our business. And then Kirby, who does the investment management for our team, he's a CFA. He's only worked with business owners on the kind of after the sale piece. So I think we have a unique position for that. And then it's just a matter of working with teams like Nuvescor to have them understand around valuation and a third party that can say, okay, this is this is the number, or this is the range of the number, and we have to be realistic with that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about how when you're having this conversation with them, it's their baby, and it's not just a numbers thing; it's an emotional thing for them. And like you can never tell a parent that their baby's ugly. It never works. And yet you have to have these conversations sometimes and say, let's face reality of what both the reality is in the market situation. And so how do you how do you both have this conversation and sit down with them and say, let's have a very frank conversation, but also how do you have them navigate those conversations with the other people involved?
Yeah, I think, first of all is giving the clear communication with the business owner that says this is kind of where you're at in your process. Being realistic about where they sit in the marketplace, I think is important too. And then to have some background around valuation,
Mhm.
multiples, the time in the market, because sometimes it's just the timing too. And then starting from that point of our relationship and saying, we've developed this over time. You you have to almost put that out there around trust,
Mhm.
because what's coming sometimes is you're not ready for the response back of, are you crazy? My business is worth this. and so it takes us a little bit to do that. But I think there's always outside constituents when you have those dialogues. So sometimes it's a partner, sometimes it's a family member, and including your spouse, your
Mhm.
husband or your wife in that, and pulling them into these discussions is important, I think. And then setting real expectations early on, and then saying who's going to be the team that helps you through this transition.
Mhm. You mentioned kind of setting expectations and stuff like that. And one of the things that we've been doing, and we've kind of developed this pattern where we work with business owners, and of course they're talking about selling their business or transitioning out, and they're looking for, kind of what is it worth and what's the number. And we often come back and say, okay, here's what our assessment is. Now, how does this match up to what you're trying to do? How does this match up to your life? How does this match up to what you are trying to do with your life? Does this actually let you live your life, or is this going to be a problem? And it's interesting because we'll often come to the conclusion after we go through all this work and all this preparation work to sell our business, we'll sit down with them and have a very frank conversation and say, here's what we're seeing. Are we actually ready to go to market with this thing? And as we have this very hard discussion, because we always, of course, want to take it to market. It's like, yeah, we want to do this. Let's do
Right,
it.
right, right.
But we're also like, maybe this is not the right timing for you, because here is what we're seeing, and here is what you need for your life. And that's a very crucial conversation. So when it comes to that, they've got to know walking in to have some good sense of what is it that I need for my life? What is it that I need out of my life, both financially, experientially, with the purpose and stuff like that? How do you go about helping them to navigate and coming to the conclusion of this is what it is? Because if you don't have it nailed down, it can get very emotional and very sticky.
Yeah, hopefully we've done a good job on our end with the business owner if we're working with them around setting expectations, really looking at planning holistically. So let's kind of dream is what we would call it with the business owner, and say, in a perfect scenario, how would you see this transitioning happening, and what
Mhm.
were the desired outcomes at the end of this, and then we can kind of work backwards towards that. But the whole, when I say holistic, that means all of their lives, mostly personally. Like you've woken up and you've done this for the rest for your entire
Mhm.
existence in this business, and you've given up all of these personal things, including your hobbies, sports, your family, all of these things to make sure that this business is successful. So when that transition period's done, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And then,
Mhm.
financially, what do you need to make your world go round? And so setting those expectations first, defining those, it helps us with the defined outcome.
There's this transition that business owners go through as they sell their business, for instance. And it is a massive transition that most business owners only go through once in their life. Some of them go through a couple times, but good chunk of them, it's only once in their life they go through this massive transition. And that's a transition that I can, in some ways, and tell me what you think about this, is only comparable in their life to getting married or having a kid. It's like, I mean, it's a transition of immense significance in your life. Um, how do they go about planning for that and asking the questions they need to around that, to say, before they hit that stage, what do I need to think about? What do I need to be aware of? What are the hard questions that I'm not really facing right now? Because we've all had this where, I mean, you get married and you think you're all set for it, and then you kind of realize there's some other questions that you should have been talking about.
Right, right. Yeah, so we have a checklist. I think it's just easy to kind of go through. We have a questioning strategy that we
Mhm.
work through, and then part of that is the feedback back to the business owner. And sometimes, when we're listening on our end, we're documenting in notes. When we go back, the business owner a lot of times will be like, I I didn't realize like how unprepared that I was for this. And so just thinking through that, and for the business owner, a lot of times when they've made that decision to transition, they check out of the business. And
Mm,
so we have to be very careful in these dialogues so that they don't take their eye off the ball of
yes,
running the
yes,
business all the way to the end. And then I think storytelling is important. We've done this a lot. So, and I've done this personally in my life, is walking them through some gotchas. And so the deals are not done until the money's in the bank. So
right.
you can get all the way to the end, and for whatever reason it is, you've put all this time and energy into it, and it doesn't happen. And so now you're faced with, okay, now I have to get back involved in the business. So we try to say, you got to run this all the way to the finish line. And so if you're not focused on that all the way till the money's in the bank, you're going to have a problem. And then we give them lots of situations, examples that we've
Mhm.
had, and I think that's been helpful. And so by the time that we're working on deal structure and we're working on, the rest of the team, accountants, tax, estate, all of those pieces, Nuvescor can do their job and get the deal done, and we can work through the process.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit. Do you remember playing, as when you had young kids, you probably play with them a game called Shoots and Ladders?
Yeah,
Okay. And you remember how the game, because you work your way up the whole thing. And then just before the finish line, you hit this one spot. It's this huge slide, go back to
yeah,
nearly the
yeah,
beginning. And I mean,
yeah,
you've got to be
absolutely.
prepared for some of those things and not take your eye off the ball. And so having an advisor like you, who's kind of like been there, done that with business owners over and over again to say, let's keep this thing going because yes, it looks good. Yes, the finish line is in sight, but let's not take her off the ball because you know what can happen. So
Well, and I think a lot of times getting the right team involved at the beginning is
Mhm.
important, and sometimes it's not having the conversations with your management team until you're ready to have those conversations, and we have a defined process for that, because that can be sticky too. You have a risk, so you go and talk to your CFO and you're saying, hey, I'm excited about this. Well, they're not always excited for this
Mhm.
process, and your management team sometimes can have some pushback. So we kind of coach the business owner on how to have those discussions, and more importantly, when. If you go early with that, you can lose
Oh
employees.
yeah.
I mean, there's
Oh
lots of
man.
things that can happen, and so a lot of times the business owner is like, oh no, we're good. You know,
Yeah.
my folks are good, and I'm saying, let me just give you a few examples of why it's important and why it's almost important to have a strategy for each person before you
Mhm.
go in and have those discussions.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I've seen it where they just think, oh, it's no problem if I tell this person, or it's no
Right.
problem if I tell, and it's like it becomes a problem. So you've got to have a strategy, like you said, on how to do that. And you navigating them through that process of saying, let's think this through before it ever comes up is
Plus
really,
plus you have competitors that are there, and
yes.
I call it blood in the water. If somebody finds out that you are transitioning, you can get a discount on your multiple because of that, because you have maybe a concentration, and that large client of yours knows that now you're going out to market, and they're like, well, I'll look for my next deal somewhere else
Yeah.
because there's a transition going on.
I mean, working in these things, we have, of course, learned how to be extremely um, uh, careful about any word getting out because of just how many things can go wrong in that process. And what we've realized is that most of the time, it's actually the business owner that gets the word out.
That's right.
It's like-
We do a lot of coaching on that one ahead. I said, okay, here's how we're going to define the communication. And
yeah,
we actually put together an entire list of who we're communicating, when, what's the dialogue, what's the strategy, and then getting the rest of the advisory team together to make sure they're on the same page as well.
yeah, yep, yep. Uh, Changing the topic slightly here, but you think about their financial picture. As they look at their financial picture, most of them, their biggest asset is, of course, the business.
Right.
Their primary business, what they do, is their biggest cash flow and it's the biggest asset that they have. But they have these other assets out there. How is it that you need to have a conversation with them to think about both the asset that they own right now and removing the asset for a big check? That's it's a massive shift in their financial situation. So we talked a little bit about the conversations, the emotions. Talk about the financial situation of this hard transition.
Yeah, it does incorporate the personal side, however, and there's emotions tied to that. Even though, we can turn it into a math problem. That's what we like to
Mhm.
say is, let's take all of your assets, put a net worth statement together, and then pull levers. The issue that we've found with business owners is that if something's going wrong in the business, they can dive in and they can physically manipulate the business. Once that liquidity event happens, now it's in our court, and they can't physically touch, they can't do anything. So we have to turn that dialogue into something that makes sense to the business owner so that they're engaged in the investment process, so they
Mhm.
feel part of that. So it's not, I have this nebulous number that's out there, but how does that affect me? Sometimes that's around cash flow. Sometimes we'll automate the investment so that it kicks off a cash flow back to the business owner, so that feels more like what they're used to. And
It's a
then
very consistent cash flow thing coming in, like their salary used to.
exactly. And then the way that we're looking at the investments is a little different too, is that we might look at more of an alternative sleeve for the business owner that they can get their heads around, because those
Mhm.
are operating companies, and we pull those folks into the discussion. So the business owner then feels like they're part of this, and they still have some juice going forward, because they've lost some of that, and a lot of the business owner's identity, their ego, all those things are tied in the business. And so
Yes.
that's the hardest thing. So we kind of mentally get them prepared for this, and then say, you're going to have this issue. And they're like, no, I'm good. I just want to sell my business. And I'm like, by experience, let me give you a few situations. And then we kind of walk them through so that in their minds, they can start thinking through these processes so we can avoid an issue in the future.
We're talking about business owners, and business owners are the people who started something alone. Like they started something on their own, and it's just something, it was them against the world. And they built up this amazing thing out of it so often. And I think one of the things you're talking about here that's really come out is just how much it takes. Trying to do this project alone of transitioning out of your business is a massive mistake of epic proportions. This one
Yes.
takes a team. And you talked about, okay, so we do a portion of that process, obviously, but I like how you talked about it, because you said, okay, so you guys do a lot of the, let's talk about what you need. And if you've got them set up properly, then they can think clearly about, should I not? When should I? You know, how, what kind of parameters should there be on, do I go or do I not go? If you've got them set up that way, they are in a much better spot than leaving that to kind of the emotions of the moment, which can lead them in a bad spot. But also, and this is the fact that you, when you're going through closing, the period of time of closing, we as a team are so focused on getting this thing across the finish line. I mean, it's like we're seeing it, we're pushing the whole thing. But to have you there who's still talking to them and saying, okay, let's talk about your communication plan. Let's talk about how you're going to bring this out here. Let's talk about how you're going to handle this, this, and this with your stakeholders, with your family, with your team, everything. That is invaluable to them, because this is a very difficult process, and have someone there holding your hand through the process is amazing. So yeah, I think it's really good. Anything else you want to bring up here? Anything else you want to add?
I just think that that selection of the team becomes super important, and knowing that it's not, somebody can be a great attorney, but if the
Yeah,
personalities don't mix, it just becomes problematic. So we really, on the front end, are, if there's an opportunity for us to recommend folks, and we say, okay, here's the person that we think that you vibe with the
right,
best, and
right.
here's the best attorney, or
Yep.
accountant, or estate, or whatever we're working with the business owner with. I think that process is very important on the front end, to make sure that the business owner is selecting the team that can be most successful for them.
And the team that you can trust, a team
That's
that you
right.
can trust, because it becomes bigger than you, and you have to trust them or it doesn't work. And so find
Exactly.
a good match, which is, I mean, why I'll talk to people about, okay, so you've got a financial advisor who's handled your 401k. Great. They're probably a great person, but this is a very different scenario here.
Well, when you talked about describing the business owner and it's you against the world, that's kind of how I felt in my business. Like, this is a second career for me, having run a manufacturing company
Mhm.
before, buying that, and then buying and selling businesses in my career. I think that's super important
Yeah,
for a business owner to understand, and then they can say, well, this person understands my situation because he's doing it right now in his business, or he's done it in the past, versus somebody who just is saying, oh, I'm an investment advisor, right?
right,
So
right.
there's a big difference with that. And I think even on your team, where you've had people that have bought and sold businesses prior to even coming to your place and run things and being responsible for P&L. I think, getting that team that they understand the business owner, and they understand what the goals and objectives are early on. That's why we do a lot of work ahead to make everybody else's job easy, hopefully.
Yep. Yeah, I forgot to mention that in the intro, but it is a very unusual thing that you as a financial advisor is someone who has bought and sold small businesses. It's a
Yeah,
very unusual thing that really kind of sets you apart there. But
yeah.
yeah. Well, hey, Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us through these things. And if we'll drop your information there on the links below. But if there's anything else you want to say, love to talk to you again at some point in the future. So thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thanks, Seth.